So let's start. Yeah, a few more participants to admit and then we start. Yeah, great. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Adrien Nortain from the French Chamber of Commerce. And today I'm very pleased to welcome our speaker, Adrien Nortain, for this casual French Lab meeting. So this Afterlab will be about sustainable IT. French Lab Singapore is a joint venture, is a joint initiative by CNRS, Ambassade de France, and French Chamber of Commerce in Singapore. So I have a few rules before we start. Please note that this presentation will be recorded. If you have any question during the presentation, please feel to ask your question, raise your hand, or ask your question during the chat box. And yeah, during the presentation, please feel to ask your question and also raise your hand, put your camera on, and enjoy the presentation. Thank you, and I pass over to you, Adrien. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So hi, everyone, and thank you for having me this afternoon, or this evening, I guess, for Singapore. So I'm Adrien, Chief Technology Officer at Zenika, and today, I'd like to share about sustainable IT. And it's a topic that I already discussed at the Green Tech Forum recently. It's all about driving the business ecosystem towards a new culture. This session is quite interactive, so don't hesitate, as it was just said earlier, to put your questions in the chat, and I will try to make it, well, very interactive as much as possible. All right, so a quick bio so you understand where I come from and why I'm going to talk about this and why I'm going to say some things maybe. The first thing is I'm a husband and father, so especially as a father, I try to look forward to what the world is going to become. So that's why I'm quite interested in the question of sustainability. I'm a Green IT enthusiast. I've been trained on Green IT back in 2016. And I was a green advocate also back then, training teams and also making sure that some of our projects when I was in consulting, in IT consulting, some of the projects that I took care about followed the best practices on that topic. I'm also Ecodesign certified with greenit.fr, and my job is mainly around architecture and transformation consulting these days. So this presentation will also have a lot of transformational leadership aspects in it. And today I'm a group CTO at Zenika, so I handle careers and strategy at Zenika. So let me start with the problem that is at stake here. We have a sense of urgency when it comes to sustainability in IT. You might know already that we have pushed some boundaries already in terms of resources consumptions on the planet. So we have a loss of biodiversity already. We have a climate crisis to handle, a problem with the oceans, some of the abiotic resources missing, and some issues also with the greenhouse gases. All right. So we understand that there is an ecological emergency right here, and the problem is on the side with IT. We see that we keep expanding, we keep developing new services every day, and the ecosystem is growing more and more. So it seems like a no-brainer, today that, yeah, sustainable IT is not an innovation topic anymore. It's kind of trendy. I mean, when you go to the forums or you talk to other customers and all, we understand that that's something that they need to tackle. It's a no-brainer these days, but they usually don't know how. The thing is, we've been doing that for more than 15 years now, and it's been since 2011 that we have more harder data to work on. And we have seen that we have many initiatives ongoing, but some of them either they're getting stopped or they don't meet the promise that they put in the first place. So the consensus these days when you go to discussions around this topic is that we need radical cultural changes. People have been sensitized about the topic. They've been trained. We know where we're at. We basically know who are the references in order to get started and how we should get started. But how do we accelerate all this? That's at the core of the discussions these days. So there's another sense of emergency. It's with the economics, as you might have known, sorry, there is a problem with the semiconductor shortage. It impacts the industry these days, and we can see that it, of course, impacts mostly the tech industry and also the IT industry in particular. We have also to understand that during the COVID period, we had a growth from something like 35% of the business services worldwide were digitized, and now we have grown up to 58% globally. In Europe, it's around 55%, globally it's 58%. So we have a growth of the digitalized business services, and at the same time, we have a shortage of resources, and that needs a balance somehow. So we have this sense of urgency. We know that we need to accelerate on the topic of sustainability, and when we had the Green Tech Forum 2021 panels back in December, the host, that was Stefan Jober, he told us for the people joining the discussion, that every time he had a topic to host, the recurring question was, how do we transform the corporate culture to accelerate the transition? Because everybody knows now how to get started and they know about that topic, but they don't know how to accelerate all this. So we come up to the conclusion, and I'm going to detail that in this presentation, that a strong culture driven by sustainability topics is actually necessary. And we're going to see what it means with these questions. What do we expect from a new sustainable IT corporate culture? What is it about? What are the necessary foundation for such a culture? Can we start it from any kind of culture, or do we need something specific, any kind of requirements? What can help us slow down our transitions, meaning what are our leverages on our blockers? Can we measure concrete progress? Because it always comes down to that when we want to transform a culture, right? We need to see if it's actually working out. And the last question is, what are the first steps of the transformation of the culture? Right. So these are the 5 questions that we answered during the panel, and I'm going to talk about that more in detail during this presentation. You can interrupt me whenever you want. So about that first question, what do we expect from a new sustainable IT corporate culture? We can ask ourselves also, are we talking about one culture or many cultures? That we will expand on. But first thing, we have to understand that there are 2 sides of the things, right? There is the ecological aspects and the economical aspects. Today, we have a shortage of talent in many tech industries. And one of the main things is that 76% of the millennials today, they would rather join a company with a stronger CSR commitment over a higher salary, right? So it becomes really a no-brainer for companies to go towards a new corporate culture based on sustainability in order to make sure that the people they hire are the best in the industry. Around 50% people take the CSR and ESG criteria into account. So if we just don't take into account the millennials, the people that will also come in the recruitment market very soon, we understand that it's already half of the population that are interested in that. This means that more and more people will actually look at this criteria, that it becomes an no-brainer that companies need to go there. But we have also seen from the studies from the ADEME in France, so that's basically the government department that looks at all this topic. They would say that this number is actually growing every year. So who should take action? That's another question that has been asked to the people around. And according to surveys, 28% of the French people think that corporations should actually take the lead. They should not wait for regulation. It should not come from the government. It should not come from their own actions, but corporations need to get in there. So that's a bit less, than a third of the population. But 50% of the population thinks that law enforcement and regulation should also enforce it. Our take here is that if you bet on the tech industry, there's no numbers leveraging that, so it's mainly my gut feeling based on the discussions that I had, so I may be biased, but we can see that it's much more than that when we talk about the tech people. And yeah, if you want to keep attractive, if you want to keep your business running, this will become one of the main, how do we say this, stake for the next years. So what else do we expect from a sustainable IT corporate culture? We expect it to be in a kind of a advocacy mode. We don't just want to look at inwards, and do things right. What we want is to make sure that the people we work with are actually doing something as well. We want to make sure that we are sharing our best practices, and whenever we work with someone, they have kind of the same mindset. So it's aligned with the B Corporation ecosystem. So you might know of the B Corp label. What it says is that we should prefer, we should prioritize working with service providers that have the same sustainable mindset, customers that have the same mindset as well, so that we kind of create this ecosystem and we make it grow. So that's what we expect from this culture as well. And we expect everything to be coherent. More and more, we've been, discovering that greenwashing is a tangible thing. So we've seen that some companies, they actually cheat on their ESG criteria and all. So what we want to see in these corporate cultures is a tangible frame and corporate actions, so a log of corporate actions that actually sustain the position in sustainable IT, right? So we want to see the social and environmental impact. We want to see that measured. We want to see what is being done internally and externally. And I'm going to talk about that with the measure part at the end of this presentation. Right. Oh, thank you for the CSR and ESG. Thank you very much. I should have put that as well. What are the necessary foundations now for such a culture? So we've been discussing what is expected from it. So we want to make sure that it's a coherent frame. We want to make sure that it keeps attractive because we want the business to keep running, the tech industry to keep running. So now, what are the necessary foundations for that? So before I start on the overall cultural topic, I can tell you what initiatives failed and why they failed, and then we can maybe deduce from that what kind of foundations we will need to not repeat the same mistakes, right? So I've seen some initiatives fail, like appoint symbolic chief sustainability officers or champions. It does not mean that they are useless, far from it, to be honest. But I've seen, some companies just make sure that, okay, they have a group of champions, they have a group of people that are interested in the topic that will, run communications internally on, okay, these are our, partnerships that we're making and so on. They communicated a lot about the corporate social investment of the companies, meaning charity or things like that are around the topic of sustainability, but there is actually no culture internally. What we've seen in the research is that most of the companies that adopt this positioning, they actually have a defensive stance, meaning that they don't actually try to improve the system, that they try to defend from the law and the regulation mainly, and it's just to keep a certain image. But when it comes to sponsoring initiatives internally, they don't do that not too much, and they tend just to have a reactive kind of mindset instead of a proactive one. And what we've seen at the beginning, right, of this presentation is that we are at this stage of our discussions where we think we should accelerate things. We cannot just stand by and wait for things to happen. We need to accelerate, so we need to be more innovative and move forward. So that's one of the pitfalls there. I've also, I'm ashamed to say that because I was part of one of these companies as well, and I helped it a bit on that. I've seen some companies aim only for labels or certifications without a long-term vision. Basically, they just want to have the labels to say, okay, we're doing our part. And you have to understand that some of these labels, like the ISO 14000, for example, what it looks at is the promises that you make on getting better, but it actually does not really assess what you are doing efficiently or not. So being labeled does not mean that much, to be honest. And I've also prepared for certifications, companies for certifications, and the way you are prepped, you are prepared to answer to the questions of the auditors and all, does not make it efficient. So you have to understand that being labeled or not should not be an objective on its own. You can be labeled on the way if it's like not an effort, but having a vision to be labeled is not really working out. So another pitfall and failure that I've encountered is a reaction to regulation changes and counterbalancing with CSI. So that comes back to the first point. If you are not here to innovate and find real solutions, but just counterbalancing your pollution and your own bad social impact on the industry and all with corporate social investment, we see that there's kind of a problem with the balance. Adopting a defensive approach and not a constructive one, we've seen that especially with the mindset of the employees, it does not stick, meaning that the employees do not find this as being part of the overall corporate culture. They will only think that, okay, we are doing this because it's being asked of us, but we don't see any value in following a sustainable IT corporate culture. So we have to be careful with that in order to onboard as many people as possible. And the last one is, I've seen a company and I worked with it recently, and we're really working inwards on, okay, what do we do internally to make sure that we have a strong sense of what should be recycled and on our global ecological footprint and all. But when it came to talking to customers, actually it was not there at all. Every time that they were helping customers, their services themselves were not responsible. They were not designed to be like this. So you have to make sure that externally and internally there is an alignment on the culture, because otherwise there's a mismatch and you lose the motivation of people that we're going to see afterwards as well. Another point is that sustainable IT is a pluridisciplinary approach, meaning that you will have to involve management, executives, engineers, product designers. Everyone is involved basically. So how do you centralize all this with just a committee or chief sustainable officers? That's not really working out. And we've seen that CSOs boards meeting, they're not really helpful in their own. They just enforce the global corporate culture. So I've heard people say, okay, we are going to start the foundation with a committee. Actually, the committee should come alongside. It should not be the basis, should not be the foundation on its own. What we've seen is that you have to change your behaviors. You have to show that you're doing something in the market and internally, and based on the actions, then you can have people, raising their hands, they want to contribute on this, and maybe you can create a committee based on that. But if you are putting the committee before the actions, that's kind of pitfall I've seen that will actually centralize all the knowledge of the sustainable IT corporate culture and not really grow it. So going back to the necessary foundations themselves and in a more positive way this time, what do we need for a new culture? Actually, we're not just talking about one culture, we're talking about many kind of cultures that we can grow. And it depends on where you're at as of today. You can take these, typologies of culture into account first and assess yourself where you're at. So if you're more clinic, for example, if you're more focused on learning, enjoyment, that would be kind of easier to make sure that, okay, your employees adopt the right actions because it will come from them, right? The adocracy type as well is kind of easier in order to start a new corporate IT culture, because people will care about your vision and they will support it if they think that it has value in that, right? When it comes to bigger companies, I would say the bigger ones with a strong corporate culture that is driven by the market, for example, or by the processes. Usually you will start by looking at the opportunities, right? You will see that if you want to grow your market portfolio, for example, you will need to address some of your customers that are really into sustainable IT. So you have to make sure that it's driven by the market. So it's more of an opportunistic approach rather than an internal innovative approach on this side, but it can work out as well, and it can help the overall ecosystem. So you do not have to point fingers too much. What you need to understand is where you're at today and what could be your best leverage in terms of your own culture in order to make sure that as many people as possible are onboarded. If it's market driven, put that in the objectives. If it's more on the internal driven, so on the learnings and all, make sure that the resources are available to your employees and that you have discussion groups on that. So it really depends where you start, right? And I'm going, well, that's the architect in me that will speak here. We have to remember the Conways, though, that whatever the organization will produce, that's actually based on its communication structure. So do assess that first to see your real capabilities in joining, well, I'm going to say the word, the fight, in this topic. So new cultures are weaved into existing one. You have to really take into account where you start in order to move forward. Because if you just say that, okay, there is one big sustainable IT corporate culture that everyone should adopt, most of the time it will fail. Is there any question? Because I've been talking nonstop for a while now. Not? All right. So let me resume then. Let's look at what can help us slow down our transition towards these cultures now. What we've seen is that 58% rate of the business services have been digitalized recently during COVID, but it's still very difficult to discuss the investment of going sustainable when most of your services are not really dependent on the digitalization themselves. I had a discussion with a customer once telling them, okay, we should make sure that everything that we put in the customer portal is actually well designed, to make sure that it's sustainable, to make sure that the choices are in line with the ecological footprint, with the social impact that we reach and that we seek and all. And what I got in return was, we don't really care because, well, our business is not really sustained by the IT itself. IT is just an accelerator for our business, but our core business, it's mainly people at counters and paperwork, administrative work. It's not really on the IT itself. So we have to make sure that in the overall vision of the company, IT is actually strategic. If IT is not strategic, talking about sustainable IT does not really make sense for the executive level. And we have to make sure that we address the executive level when it comes to the transition towards a corporate culture, right? So you are in a good context, and it's really a lever for you if the IT services are indistinguishable from the business services. If you can distinguish them and you can just say that, all right, they're just optimizers. We got our business services, but IT is just on top of it. You'll have a blocker that. So you need to make sure that you can, realign the fact that, okay, you cannot survive without IT. The ratio is actually growing fast. I've told you earlier, it's 58%. That's from a McKinsey study, and maybe in the next years it will even grow faster. Yep, it came from 36% to 56% within a year, right? And now it's 58 globally. Another driver that can accelerate your transition is the direct financial benefits. And I'm not gonna lie, about like 50% of the French people said, I would go green. I would go green tomorrow if I could, because I can't afford it as of today. So make sure that going green actually has a good, financial benefits, and make it tangible, make it in numbers, and show what you can gain from that. It's actually essential. So it's the first motivation factor for most companies and people. We have to be honest about that. 15% people declare they cannot afford going green. The positive financial outcomes need to be tangible and measurable. It can be indirect sometimes, but it still needs to be tangible, sorry. Meaning that even if the direct financial benefits does not directly go to the employees of the companies or to the clients and all, it needs to say, okay, how it makes the ecosystem better. and what we can drive in the mid to long term, basically. The organizational culture type, I've discussed that earlier with the last chapter. So if you're highly bureaucratic or market driven, you're going to be more opportunistic. So that can slow down a bit if your market is not really in line with that. But as we have seen, the market responds more and more positively to this topic. It becomes kind of a trend. If you look at sustainable IT, it's not just an innovative topic anymore. It's the actual topic these days, right? It's the current one. Collaborative and innovation driven, more idealistic, make sure that you have idealistic people on board. And as I've said earlier, the number of these people is going to grow. There is a new law that has been voted in France, and I expect, well, France is a bit, in advance in these topics, but I expect it to be more spread out in the next years. But it is become compulsory now that in schools, people are taught or are sensitized on these topics. So what we are going to gain in the next 5 to 10 years are people that are going to know about these things, and they will already have a good sense of what should be done for the future. So they will be more idealistic. So a collaborative or innovation-driven corporate culture is actually something that you might want to look at. Training is an accelerator. I keep hearing, okay, can you train us on Green IT? When I was in the forum, most of the people going forward to Zenika were asking us, okay, what do you do in terms of training? And we keep repeating, training is good for sensitizing people. It's an accelerator to know about what you're talking about. It does not replace the daily individual experience nor your concrete actions. So usually what we advise is that, okay, you start with a training, but you need to make sure that it's embedded in your work. All right, the relevant matrix display, and that's also a transition for the next part on matrix. Choose one or two at a time, right? That's about transformational leadership. Do not, have a big dashboard with a lot of metrics, different metrics that you cannot work at the same time on or in parallel. Just make sure that every time you work on a metric, it actually translates to a meaningful impact, and just worry about one or two of them. The metrics need to be coherent, aligned with the digital responsibility vision. That's a no-brainer. And that's something that, and it's not just, promoting or advertising my work at Zenika as a consultant, but external help is also very useful. Actually, even Zenika, we work on this matrix internally to see what our impact is, and with our customers as well. And we seek external help as well. We don't do it on our own. We make sure that we are challenged on our metrics, that whatever our CO2 impact is, for example, our greenhouse gases emission is, it's double checked by another entity, and all that. We are not biased on our own actions, right? It's very important to not be biased by our own perceptions. So now, how can we actually measure concrete progress? And I guess that's something that can be interesting for you. So we've determined 4 primary axes to evaluate our progress. 2 are at the people's level. So one is on the individual sensitivities of people, and it's going to go back to how many of them are actually trained on the topics and so on. The second thing is, what are the habits of the people, their actual habits? What do they do concretely? Because they can be sensitized on the topic and not do anything about it. So what is your actual impact on that? We have 2 at the corporate level. So at the governance part, one is on the hardware governance, because I don't know if you've known that, but most of the impact is on hardware when it comes to the ecological footprint of IT. It's not really on the electricity or things like that. It's on building hardwares. So pre-manufacturing and manufacturing itself account for the most footprint. And we have another part on the business governance, and that will mainly evaluate the potential that you have in spreading out the good words, basically, internally and externally. So when we look at this, how they work together, we can look at the people potential and impact on at the vertical part, and the company potential impact on the horizontal side. if you have good people potential and impact, usually you have very strong people initiatives. If the problem is that if it's not supported, sponsored by the company itself, you'll probably reach demotivation of the people. That happened. Basically, one of my customers that I told you about, the thing with the portal that I was leading, and people were a bit demotivated. They were like, oh, yeah, we put all these efforts forward and it's not supported by the company because the company does not believe that, you know, the IT is actually very strategic for them because they think that's the business on its own is strategic. So we had a demotivation on that side. On the other hand, if you do not involve your employees and you only have, you know, corporate initiatives, and I've seen that in another customer, and it's good because every week you keep getting these emails on, oh, we are doing all this in corporate social investments, look at all these corporate initiatives. And when you actually go to the meetings, you have 9 people that are from the committees that are present and 2 persons from the actual project teams that are present. And that's, you know, there is complete disengagement from the employees. I mean, it's just the committee that handles these topics, and you don't really have a big impact there. So you have to balance that out in order to make it sustainable. You have to make sure that at the people's level and at the corporate level, you have a balance so that all the actions that are taken actually move forward. All right, let's have just a small focus on each and every type of matrix. So the individual sensitivities, I'm not going to share with you our exact survey that we have designed internally, but I'm going to give you the guidelines then. So for the individual sensitivities, we look at the potential of what we could achieve with the employees. So we measure our onboarded population in our initiatives. So how many people we've trained, so being sensitized, how many people are actually active on the topic, what do they do, is it something that is widespread, or do we see that overall most people do not really act, they don't really try to seek actively information on that? How many people directly worked on the related issues? Do they work on projects that have an impact on sustainability or not? Do they talk about it in their projects? That's something that we want to measure. How many new ideas do we get on the topic per month? And the ideas outside of the committees, on the system, outside of the sustainable committees, how many do we get? And so on. So I can talk about Zenika, for example. Most of the time we'll get a lot of new ideas coming from many different people that are outside of our own sustainable committee internally. We have 4 green advocates, basically, and most of the ideas that we get actually do not come from the advocates. They come from other employees that say, look, I've designed, for example, an application that will shrink the size of your video in order to embed it in your website so that you're going to help on that. We had other initiatives like, oh, I've actually I actually went to a school in order to do that 1-hour session with students on that topic. So it always comes from the consultants themselves. So we know we have good potential here. We had matter for growth, basically. So that's something you want to look at. Habits now. How do we measure the actual application of the best practices globally? So, and it goes into harder things, more concrete stuffs here. How many devices on average per employees? And you have to ask them, how many smartphones do you have? How many computers? What do you do with that? Do you change every year? And also, what's the renewability there? So how many devices you purchase per year? So you have to be careful here with the confidentiality of the data, of course, because you still want it to be quite anonymous, but you want to assess that. What do we actually do internally? Well, what do people do at work, but also on the side? How many subscriptions to green power providers? So that's mainly for your physical, workplaces. Do they do that? But also, do they do that on the side? Especially because of remote work these days. How many devices are turned off when not actually used? Do you yourself actually turn off your computers and all when you go to sleep? That's something you need to look at. What are the flexible working adjustments in place? What we've seen as well in Zenika when we were audited is that before COVID, most of our greenhouse gases emission impact were on the our consultants going to their workplaces or at our customers. We've been reducing that a lot since COVID. Of course, there's kind of how do I say that? The impact that we don't have anymore on the transport. We actually see that on the use of the electricity. So we have to make sure that they also subscribe to green power providers, or we actually sensitize them about it and follow up on that. All right. Now about hardware governance. So that's more of an executive topic. So how do we measure our actual impact? We look at how many recycled devices we have in our assets. So more and more we focus on policies in order to renew the materials. For example, back then at Zenika, we had we had a policy that every consultant could renew their hardware every 3 years. It was not that sustainable. So now there is no such policy. It's that as long as your computer works, you don't get to renew it, except if this computer goes into one of our contract with one of our hardware providers that can recycle it, that can make sure that they can recycle the components. So we have this partner that can do that for us, but some of our hardwares are not recyclable. So these particular devices, we make sure that we use them as much as possible in the long term. What is the average repairability index of our corporate devices? So we make sure now that in Zenika, we buy hardware that can be repaired. And we are actually testing these days. I forgot the name. I think it's I forgot the name of the laptop, but it's a completely repairable laptop. So all the components in these laptops can actually be replaced with standardized components. So RAM, battery, anything, you can actually take it out and replace it. So if you have one thing not working in it, you can just replace that particular component without throwing everything in the trash and get a new one. So that's something you want to look at. How many eco-designed hardware devices in our assets? So I've just told you about this particular laptop that is eco-designed. We've tested another one from Y. I mean, it's WHY and exclamation mark. That's a brand in France. And it was not bad at all. It was eco-designed because it was mostly designed from recycled components, but also it was making sure that it's not overpowered. It's designed for the purpose that you're going to use it for. Right? How many devices from unsustainable brands? I'm not going to say the names here, but we have some of them, and we need to make sure that we keep them at a low ratio. Framework laptop, yeah, it was kind of like this. All right. And last but not least, the business governance. What is our potential for growth and to spread our culture as well, internally and externally? So how many employees are actually onboarding on our sustainable IT strategy? How many raise their hands to join a committee or to have more impact or to join projects that work on these issues? How many partners or clients are aligned with the strategy? So do we make sure that we work with an ecosystem that has the same mindset, or do we help an ecosystem that does not have this mindset and we're working against us? How many services, products, and offers are aligned with our strategy? How many teams, business units, partners are aligned with the strategy as well? Because if you have just a small team, as I said earlier, it's not going to work out. If you have one people in each and every team, that might work better, and so on. All right. And before I move on to the last part, is there any question? Not any? All right. Don't hesitate. So what are the first steps of a transformation? Because I've been talking about theory, also some feedback from the field as well. So how do we tackle that now? How do we move towards a sustainable IT corporate culture? The first thing is that we should take into account the adoption curve. Of course, this curve does not show, I took that out of the internet, it doesn't show also the chasm that we can have over time, but because I want to focus more on the types of population that you are going to address. When you address enthusiasts and visionaries, actually it's easier. With them, just with training and sensitization, it works out pretty well. They will move on their own. At Zenika, that's the first people that we address, we train them and all, and these are the ones outside of the committees that have the most impact at their customers and also in their daily life. So just that is enough. The pragmatists, that they're around 34% usually of your companies, mainly with actions and measures. So that's where the measures will actually be very impactful, the ones that I talked about earlier. You need to show them what is actually being conducted by the company, what is the impact of these initiatives, how they can join the fight basically, and what impact they can have as well, what are the frameworks that they can use, what are the materials they can use, and also with whom they can understand and go deeper into these topics. So usually with these people, just act, and they will come along, right? Then we have the laggards, what we call the laggards in the adoption curve. So we have conservative people that think afterwards that yes, they should have done it earlier, but because they're skeptics, right? They're kind of skeptics, but that's the last part. They think that they should be, proven wrong before they can act. And these people usually, you can't really do things with them. I'm going to be honest, you have to wait for regulation and compliance. They are never going to be proactive in a way. You just have to wait for them to react to some kind of constraint. So either you have the power to put constraints on that. So if you're at an executive level, you make sure that these employees are onboarded through constraints. Okay, you own corporate regulation, or you just let them be and you focus more on the 50 or the %. It's up to you, it depends on your strategy. So for employees internally, what it means that you have to use engaged people as advocates. The advocates are going to make sure that communication is actually quite smooth. There, you're going to make sure that they also appear externally, that they discuss with the right people, and you are going to use them whenever you need to go in depth with the actual actions. Because if you just talk about corporate social investments, such as charity work and all, it will only, help like a few people. But when you tech advocates and you put them in forums, internally with working groups, and whenever you can on different projects, and you make them rotate, you make sure that the topic is widespread, right? Pragmatists, then you have to present the benefits. So dashboards are really useful internally, and you have to multiply the references to get them on board. You need to say, look at all that we're doing. You can be a part of it as well. And it's easy. We present you our framework. So you need to prepare for that. You need to welcome them into actions that are already ongoing. For the last one, enforce behaviors, whatever you can internally. That's your only lever here. For partners with the external ecosystem, with your market and all, what can you do? Advocate together, join forces. You have, these kind of meetings that we have, Afterlabs and all. You can discuss your experience together. You can talk about your failures. I just shared with you. You can talk about your successes as well, because that's positive way of thinking, very solution focused. The pragmatist externally, you have to convince them. You have to report the benefits. You have to showcase what you have done in the past. You have to tell them, okay, we can repeat that with you. So that's kind of a stance you should adopt. And unfortunately, my advice for the partners that are more conservative or skeptics is that you should not focus on them at first. That's an advice. You can maybe overcome that and spend too much time on that. What I've seen in the past for the last 5 years, 7 now, no, 6, sorry. For the last 6 years that I've really discussed this topic with customers, with colleagues and all, is that whenever you go to partners and you try to talk to conservatives on that, it does not stick. So my advice is do not waste time on that. There is already 50% of your ecosystem that you can onboard. Maybe don't focus too much on the last 50 ones. So towards new cultures. So it's kind of a keep, start, stop for the conclusion. Keep training and sensitizing. We need to make sure that our innovators, our scouts, they know what they're talking about. So we need to keep training them, sensitizing them in order to grow our sponsor base, the people that we can then spread out to communicate more about the topic. We need to start concrete actions because that's what we miss in most companies. Based on the feedback from the Green IT, from the Green Tech Forum, is that most companies, yes, they're sensitized, they want to get there, but in terms of concrete actions, they don't know how to change their culture. So 3 things, right? Governance, make sure that you got executive sponsorship and actual, policies are put into place. Organizational structure, do assess where you're at. Make sure that it's aligned with your corporate culture, otherwise it will not stick in time. And the financial part, make sure that the financial benefits are actually forecast, that you know where you're headed, that you know as well what you can invest and what is invested also in the concrete actions and for which return that you're expecting. And stop worrying about 100% adoption, because what I've heard is also, okay, we want to be the big sustainable IT company. And in the end, only like, 20% of us, they're really into the effort. Yeah, do not reach for 100%. Instead of saying, okay, we still need to convert 80% of our workforce, just focus on the 30% first. And maybe later you can think about onboarding everyone when everything is coherent, right? And last but not least, the concrete topics to generalize. So I have not lingered on them at all, but LCA is very important. That's on the actual measure what your business services deliver out there. And LCA is lifecycle assessment of your digital services. I actually was trained on that. It makes you compare many different options in order to deliver services out there and to assess their ecological footprint and also their social impact as well. And when you have all these assumptions, you can compare them together. You can assess why you chose one of the others based on a real methodology, on a scientific methodology. This is quite difficult because it needs experience and also a lot of training on that. It's a scientific approach, so it's not for everyone. But I do believe that it's necessary for all companies to actually invest in a couple of people getting to know about this. Ecodesign, that can be widespread, to be honest, just for sensitizing on how we can have a meaningful impact on hardware design, on the services designs themselves, on product design, and also on architectural design. And the circular economy. That was one of our previous intervention with the French Chamber of Commerce. There was this whole talk on the circular economy and how it can impact really the whole ecosystem. That's where you can really double your efforts. And thank you. And we have one question.
Yes. Yeah,
Two questions.
You. Yeah, you have some questions. You have so many questions. Yes, maybe we will help you to read the questions so we have more interactivity. So we have one question from Isabelle. She asked, do you have any example of concrete actions?
All right, concrete actions on which aspects? Maybe Isabelle can...
Isabelle, can you raise your hand? Yeah.
Maybe unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm on mute.
Yes. Hi.
Okay, it was regarding your last slide.
Yes.
So you were talking about keep training and sensitizing the employees. So about
so the concrete. Okay, concrete actions. Maybe you want one more on governance or structure. Which one would be more interesting for you?
Maybe governance.
On the governance itself? Right. On the governance, as I said earlier, there are two different topics, right? There's the hardware governance and the business governance. What I would suggest is focusing first on the hardware governance, and some example of concrete actions that we've taken internally at Zenika as well is to make sure that your service provider or your hardware provider per se already gets their hardware from part of it from recycled sources. So make sure that they have also a policy to handle the end of life of your furniture, of your hardware. Make sure that whenever there is a problem in the hardwares that they can be repaired. These are concrete actions that actually go a long way. We've seen that when we've put that in place at Zenika, we've considerably reduced the renewal of our materials, of our hardwares. We've seen that it has a very good financial impact as well. I've not discussed that, but it's very good. And also based on repairability. So whenever we have an issue with our laptops, usually they get repaired very fast and we don't need to change them completely. So that's where I guess you can have the most impact. On the business governance, start with metrics, I would say, and make sure that every time you have a new partner with the same mindset, you have a project that is aligned with what you're trying to put in place, it's actually well communicated. That's one of the main concrete actions that you can do on that.
Okay, I have a better idea because I'm not completely new in this field. So okay, thank you.
So we have another question from Mathieu from Klaxoon asking, do you think green sensitivity should be a criteria to recruit new talent or to grow existing talents?
I think it's the other way around, right? I don't think it's going to be a criteria anymore soon. I think it's going to be one of the constraints that we'll have to deal with. I mean, most of the new talents, they're going to be more and more sensitized on this topic, so we have to prepare for that. If today we have to focus more on that, I'd say it depends of what you're trying to achieve. If it depends on your own corporate culture. If your own corporate culture is, let's go back there. Just a moment. Oops. Okay. If your own corporate culture is more clinic or more advocacy driven, I would say yes. I would say green sensitivity should be a criteria because you want to make sure that it's not disrupting your current culture, your current strengths in order to grow your sustainable IT corporate culture that you want to put in place. If you're more hierarchical or market driven, it will not really impact everything, I would say, because people will not really get onboarded with, we have a champion. Okay, great, we have a champion, but what do we do with that if the market is not here? And also, it really depends where you're at in your current organization, I would say.
Okay, thank you. We have one more question by Stanley from SubGen. He said, we are trying to adopt hardware recycling, extending device beyond warranty. The counter argument is that new device can be more energy efficient than older models. Would that net off the efforts on reducing carbon footprint? What is your take?
Yeah, I agree also on that. And I got the same, I got the same feedback also, not only for hardware, but also for softwares that are more efficient and all. We have to seek balance, right? And that's why I say LCAs are really important to look at, because when you have this scientific approach and you can break down the services that you want to put in place. So a service can also be, have a laptop where you can code or something like that. So it can be also on an internal usage, I would say. But what you can break down is if you get a new laptop, what's going to be the impact on manufacturing, because you have databases that can actually account for that, on the abiotic resources and all. And you can scientifically compare if you keep your new your old hardware and you keep repairing, and if you get a new one, and how many years you would need in order to have the correct balance. And when I was trained, we looked at these use cases, and what we saw in one of these use cases is that you needed to use the new hardware for at least 5 years afterwards. So if you make sure that this new hardware can be, on top of functioning for the next 5 years, yes, you can take that decision. I'm going to go with new hardware and let go of the older ones, make sure it's recycled as much as possible. No, but you can move on. But an LCA is necessary to, have a concrete and well tangible decision there.
Yeah. Thanks. We have maybe a few more questions before we end the session. So I got one question from Jason. He said, if we are about to start new business, what criteria or requirement of people that we should prioritize to be our partner or employee if we want to have a sustainable IT culture?
Okay, so you're about to start a new business.
Yeah.
People should prioritize. Okay. Well, I guess you can also go to this part here. All right. These axes. What I would look at is if you want to hire someone, just ask them, are they sensitized? Do they want to get in there? What are their current habits? What habits they would, go for as well? And then you will categorize them, but I don't really like labeling people. So, but in your mind, I mean, everyone is biased at some point, and you will see if they can help you where. If they can help you, for example, on advocacy, if they can help you on actually going in the field and doing the work on sustainability, it's up to you, right? So what I would suggest when you start a new business and look at this is to seek balance. You also have to have people that are a bit market driven and that can see how this can help your market, because if you put everything, if you bet everything on the internal functions, I would say, most of the time you will have a misalignment. So I would say a bit of every kind of profiles at every place is actually better than having a stronger team that is centralized. It goes back to the topic of centralization. So I would suggest for diversity, and it really depends on the people then. But the criteria I would look at are these ones, and if they're really sensitive about them.
Shall I take the next question? Read it out loud. If you have to confront the conservatives, skeptics in the company, how would be best way to tackle them?
Yeah, as I've said earlier, unfortunately, trying to convince them, it's not completely wasted effort, because maybe you will convert some of them, right? But most of the time, they will be, even if you convince them a bit on, yeah, it should be the way to go, please look at this and all, at some point their priorities are not the same as yours. So for me, it's not completely wasted effort, but you might spend more efforts towards the other one. So I would say, just put the constraints in your system. If you're at an executive level, putting the rules of this is our governance, this is how we do things, and you don't have a choice because it's in your performance review as well, that's actually the best approach. And I'm sorry to say that, but that's what I've seen in the past. And based on the literature as well, on I don't know if you know this book on Fearless Change by Linda Rising, and I forgot the name of I think it's Mann, the other author, Dr. Mann, but that's what they detail in their research on changing corporate cultures, is that the laggards and all, you have to focus on them at the very end of your initiative. Don't spend too much time on them at first.
We have a question from Laurent Fabry, who says, so do you mean that we better buy the most powerful hardware to be green efficient?
No, that's not what I said. I said you should do an LCA and see how many years you need to use the new hardware in order to see when there's balance. Yeah.
Let's see. That's it for the questions. Oh, one just came in. So big data and data centers are poised to become a leading cause of energy consumption. Do you have the impression we are on the right path to taking this?
Yeah, I think we are on the right path. Let me elaborate. Yeah. let me elaborate a bit more. I think we're on the right path because, well, first thing is that even if big data centers and all, they're growing in their impact, that's true. Today, they're nowhere close to the impact that we have on the manufacturing of new user devices, right? Servers have been optimized for years now. We know how to make sure that the energy efficiency is well taken care of. We have measures, so we know where we're at. We know how to cool them in more efficient manners. We have patents for that. We also know how to recycle servers better, because when you're recycling a server, I think the recycling rate for that exposed by Google is around 20% of the components that can be recycled and reused in the other servers in the data centers. Whereas when you want to recycle a user device, such as just that, right, a mobile device, most of the time you will see the whole thing ending up in the trash, and it's pretty difficult, right, to get the micro components from that. So I would say that, you said energy consumption, not really on the manufacturing part. Even on energy consumption, it's not really what has the most ecological footprint, I would say, because it depends also of where your energy comes from. So it's very complex. It's very complex. The grids are very complex these days. Some of the energy comes from nuclear, and nuclear, you know that you can say it has less greenhouse gases emissions, but that it's very difficult to manage the waste, whatever we can say about it. Because I've been working 4 years for nuclear energy softwares and with scientific, so I know a bit the topic. You have to understand that the data centers are not really the issues here. And even the energy consumption of the data centers is not really the big impact. The biggest impact is on the user devices, even on the electrical part.
Thank you, Adrien, for the clear response. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sorry, just one number in order to sustain that. We have 34 billion user devices that are in circulation out there, whereas we have only 70 million servers that we need to take care of. So you just do the math and you see that, yeah, we have to take care of one problem before the other.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you, Adrien, and thank you for all the attendees. It's time for the end of the session. It was a very interesting topic. Thank you for sharing this in this Afterlab. So before we end the session, I would like to share that we have put a survey, a survey link in the chat box. It will be good if you can give us your feedback for the next session or new ideas of topic for the next Afterlab. So thank you again, Adrien, and all the team and all participants for tonight's participation. So we hope to see you in our next Afterlab. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.